this. You keep me begging for this. I'm chasing the feeling. I know to and I just can't resist. Yeah, I just can't resist. Do what I do. So baby, roll with this. Yeah, baby, roll with this. I can do this all day. I can do this all day. Back up, run this town. I'm headed for the disco going down. I can do this all day. I can do this all day. Take your best shot, show me what you know you can't resist. You know I'm ready for this. I just do what I do. I ain't got nothing to prove, so just roll with this. Yeah, baby, roll with this.
All right. Thank you for joining our afternoon presentation here at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. We have the first episode of Heart to Heart with this gentleman. How do my fingers work? That way. There. Thanks, Al. With Alan Hart. This is Heart to Heart, and we have Frazier hiding behind me. So we're going to go set them up over in the conference room, and we're going to be right back. We're just about 10 minutes before we go live with episode 1, Heart to Heart. Alan Hart talks to Ann Frazier. So thank you for tuning in. Enjoy some music. We'll be right back.
Can't wait till I'm back up there. Won't be so hard, love. We might no shows about a day. Won't so hard, love. I hate when I bring you down so low. I hate when I bring I get so hard to love. And I get so restless in my modern ways. That's why I'm so hard to love. I just seem to bring you down, baby. I just seem to bring you down so low. And I can't change it or fake it. God knows I get so hard to love. And I can't change it or fake it. God knows I get so hard to love. Never really meant to. For all the things that I never really meant to. I'm sorry. And I can't change it or fake it. God knows I get so hard to love. And I can't change it. God knows I get so hard to love. And I can't change it or fake it. God knows I do love. And I can't change it or fake it. God knows I get so hard to love.
So what's the best time for you? We could play your games, but I could never see you lose. And I've been checking out your moves. You will slip and slide, but I can always catch your groove, catch your groove. I've been hurt before and saw you inside me. Pulling on my heart, all the strings will fly, see. You can take the cake, I'm just icing. Blow so quick, never fuck with the Pisces. But I learned quick. We could change shape in a tick. With a broken heart and nights apart, I'm wide awake and I'm just still thinking about you. Baby, I've been doing all I can, and baby, I'm not built to fight like on the daily. But you know I just need a little training, and now I'm a little too much. We get stuck in this place where I'm lost without a chase, but I can't seem to find any better use of time. Come on now, baby. Yeah, you know I just need a little training. Come get me. So what's the best time for you? Yeah, we can play your games, but I could never see me lose. Yeah, I've been checking out your moves. You a slip and slide, but I can always catch your groove. Catch your groove. But we so dark. I like this better at the start. Just once forgiveness free, but we don't backtrack gracefully. But baby, I've been doing all I can, and baby, I'm not built to fight like on the daily. But you know I just need a little training, and now I'm a little too much. We get stuck in this place where I'm lost without a chase, but I can't seem to find any better use of time. Come on now, baby. Yeah, you know I just need a little training. Come get me.
Ooh, got a little feedback there. All right, we are just on time for our, let's kill the music there, for our afternoon presentation on Fine Mineral Gallery, part of the 2026 speaker series, first episode ever. And this is a tradition that continues. This is Heart to Heart, where Alan Hart has sat down with Ann Frazier. You can see them right there. Alan Hart's going to sit and chat, and Frazier is going to tell us all about fascinating life with Cy and the early days of Idar Oberstein. And this is really going to be a historic interview, but you will really learn to appreciate and what she has done. So we are just about looking like we are at tea time. So let me zoom the camera out a little bit so that I got Stu there. Where's Stu? He will be at this camera angle. All right, let's take a look in there. And let's start the show. Let's turn their mics on here. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. Great to see faces here for this afternoon's talk with Alan Hart and Frazier, and my favorite titled presentation to date, Heart to Heart. So, Alan Hart.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, let me introduce myself. I think my name is Alan Hart. I know many people, know many of you people, but for those who curator at the Natural History Museum, the British Museum Natural History, in 1981, that's when I started there. I was there for 34 years as a curator. I became head of collections. It was a fantastic career, but there, and I became the CEO of the Gemological Great Britain for 8 years, and then I left there at my own small company where I look at minerals and I have leisure to do what I like. Fantastic. I think we thought about this series called Heart to Heart. We know many people, but do we really know the people that are our passion and our subject matter? This is the first one, Heart to Heart. I'm delighted to welcome Anne Frazier, who I've known for many years, but many people won't know this, that when I first joined the museum, it seems, in registers like Anne Frazier, Cy and Anne Frazier, and also the Minerals Unlimited, but we'll hear more about that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to talk to Anne. You're going to tell us your life story. You're going to tell us anything you like. We'll take questions as we go through. I'm quite happy you're happy that you maybe want to clarify something or mention something, and we'll take it there. So Anne, where should you start? Let's start from the beginning. Tell us about yourself.
Okay, well, I was in Oklahoma in December of 1939, and then they moved out to California in 1943. My father started working for the Department of Agriculture, where I actually live now about 4 blocks from where my dad worked. Let's just skip a part of my life, pretty damn boring. I was not a collector. My family did not collect. My dad cleaned the closets so we could see the wall in the back about every 6 months. Books were taken out of the library so that they could be returned. And then I met Cy in an anthropology class at the University of California in Berkeley. He was majoring in geology or mineralogy. His master professor was Dr. Adolf Pabst. We met in about 1958, got married in 1961. He started working for Minerals Unlimited in 1948 when he was about 14. When I met him on becoming an archaeologist, I was going to go back to MIT, following my professor that I was working with there at the university. And Cy and I met in this anthro class, and interesting, he said, let's go down. He took me down to Minerals Unlimited, showed me around. And we started dating, kind of. Our first date was with his, hers, and theirs, 7 of them. We took them to a movie. We had no I understand that was an experience and a half. Anyway, we got married in London.
Okay.
September of 1961. British Museum that afternoon, and that's when I met.
Yep.
Was my that as a collectible kind of thing. It stuck, and here I am.
When you went to London, did you spend much time in the Natural History Museum looking at the collection?
Oh, absolutely. In
Yep.
fact, we got to know people. Ralph bought a collection, really extensive, and he ended up mortgaging his house and send us some books down to the British Museum and asked Peter if he would use these as collateral, and because we were going to drive up to Scotland to do some collecting.
Right.
Peter took us across the street to the bank and gave us £200, which was a lot of money then, and sent us on our way. This RB in England. Ralph was intent on becoming the West Coast Ward's natural history establishment, and he was looking to get material that was rock samples, minerals, and this sort of thing in kits. So that about, I'd say 6 to 9 months before we went through his mineral collection and through his inventory, finding things that we would be available for us to go and field collect in Europe. So when we got to England, we were there for we went across 9 VW, not bus, bug, and we until the following November and shipped them back to the United States. We did Portugal, France, Italy, the north. That was truly a mineral. Because primarily great letters from Dr. Papp, people there in Europe. So we kind of had, we did in Elba at Rio Marina, collected Carrara. We collected at, in fact, out of Carrara because they're going to do some blasting that morning.
Yeah.
And we're camped where they're planning on. And then we came back to the United States, and I went back to school to get his master's degree. Said that the city of Berkeley was wanting to buy the property where one of his stores was, the warehouse facility, shall we say. We found a shipping company there in London. It was called LEP.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they had offices all over Europe. The places, I mean, just this little hole wall. We would go there, and what we did was we made arrangements. We could go anywhere, and they gave us a list of their offices and this sort of thing. We would collect. We'd get a 55-gallon oil drum that was empty. Open it up like it was a can of beans, pull the lid back, dump the stuff in, hammer the lid back on, pallet, and we give them the shipping information, and off it went. We did not spend doing this. Ralph took it on the other end, and we didn't have any trouble. We shipped a wooden box about that size to the Smithsonian. Bits and pieces that we had collected overall, we left it in front of a letter in Livorno, Italy, with a note, handwritten note tacked onto it. Shipped this to Paul Desautel's at the care of the Smithsonian, COD. And when we went to the Smithsonian, when we got back to the United States, Paul had gotten the shipment.
Wow, there you go.
Life was easier in the 60s, to say the least. But we brought we took a Norwegian freighter back to the United States and brought back with us. We paid $350 for it when we bought it. We replaced the motor with a rebuilt motor in it when we came home. Believe it or not, it was not running. It had some major problems, but because it was a 52 and it was not an export model, we sold it for $3,500.
Wow, nice one. Worth today.
I don't know. I didn't collect anything literally until I met Cy. And Ralph had this company called Minerals Unlimited. It was started by some fellow by the name of Dave Grigsby. He ended up at Ultraviolet Products. Scott Williams, who some of you might recognize the name. Scott was married to Ralph's current wife. Or when Scott and me were married, they had 2 kids. This gets really interesting because this is truly the history of Frazier's Minerals and Lapidary and Minerals. Scott married Mimi, married previously, he had 2 kids. It's Rocky and Sandy. And then let's get here. They had 2 kids. Anyway, so Scott Jr. had a mineral collection, and he and his buddy wanted to buy a motor scooter. And his mineral collection was up for sale, and I bought it. So that's how I started collecting specimens from Cy, and Ralph paid me in mineral specimens when I helped unpack things. So in June of 1961, Cy was getting ready to go to Europe. I had to finish up my degree at the university. And I decided down to the Federation show at Pomona that year, and I decided I would compete. Okay, now I have been collecting for what, 9 months, maybe a year? And I put in a case of minerals, competed against Marion Godshaw and some other people, and got a blue ribbon. But then if you got X number of points, anybody got a blue ribbon. And if you got X number, Y number of points, anybody got a red ribbon. So it wasn't that big a deal. But it's the only time I really competed. Anyway, so we ended up in Europe, came back, got the shop, and then when we closed the store, we decided we would just do mineral shows, and he was going to be teaching maybe whatever. And then he wrote some articles for a gentleman by the name of John Patrick, who some of you might recognize. He put on one of the first independent gem shows here in Tucson. That was years ago. Anyway, John started a magazine called Jewelry, Gem, and Crystal News, or something like that. Anyway, he asked I to write to write an article about Idar Oberstein because we had started going over there and buying gemstones. So I said, well, I don't think I can do that in one article, maybe 3. John said, okay, we can do that. When John turned the magazine off, we were starting part 23. And these articles were read by June Cup-Leitner, who was an author at the Lapidary Journal, and she called Cy and asked if they could reprint some of those articles. And Cy said, well, let me think about it. And he got a call from the guy who was then the owner of the magazine, and we cut a deal, and so we started writing for the Lapidary Journal in about 88, 89 for them until about 2010, 2012, something like that. It's somewhere around 200 articles that we did for the magazine. I'm thinking about maybe trying to get them reprinted, but that's another story in itself. Anyway, so here we are.
I think what's amazing is that I know the Pomona show, when you read some of the early texts about that show, it is quite competitive, come on, you must admit. And for you to win a blue ribbon on your first try there was really cool.
Well, you have to realize that I got specimens out of Scott Jr.'s collection.
Yeah.
And you know, he had, even though he was young, he was in high school, had a good eye. And I had things on the side. And I held the first shipment of material that had come out of Chuquicamata, Chile, in I don't know when. He managed to get this from a guy who had worked down on the property. And so I had, my pay was, after Ralph picked and Cy picked, then I got to pick three specimens that I wanted for my own collection. And I was collecting thumbnails, and I was interested in species. So I had a Leightonite, an Atacamite, a Cronkite, and stuff from Chuki that hadn't seen the light of day forever. You know, this is, I think I'm better if they understood what rare.
I mean, when I look back at my early days at the British Museum, you were actually involved with people like Peter Embry and Des Wells, you know, from museums. It was a very academic type of establishment. The only publications you had were the academic papers that were written by papers or the researchers' mineralogy. Right. I remember when I first opened my first lapidary journals and the Min Record, you actually got an insight, and there is another world of mineralogy out there with many people involved in the subject matter that was all hidden from view, and their publications gave you great insight in worldwide mineralogy rather than mineralogy.
Right.
And I found that fascinating, and I think the hub of that.
One of the things that we found writing for the Lapidary Journal, Merle would call and say, I need an article about XYZ. Okay. If it had to do with quartz, that worked for us, or if it had to do something having to do with who was doing some lapidary work, or that where we could go in and look at what they were doing. I can't remember, we were in Europe, and she said, are you going to go see what's happening with the Archaeopteryx locality and everything? And we said, well, yeah, we thought we might. She said, well, write me an article about Archaeopteryx.
Okay.
So I had never taken a paleo class. He'd never taken paleo. So we wrote an article about Archaeopteryx. But, you know, our real, everybody has asked me, when did you decide to collect quartz? Because that's kind of where we are. We never really, I don't think you really make it. You're setting the dining table, collect quartz from now on. No, you kind of evolve into it. I evolved into this starting with the first thing Cy had me do was to remount his micro mount. Okay, now I don't know anything about crystals. I didn't mount too many of them upside down. It was the British, believe this or not, it was the British Museum that really turned me on to species collecting. I walked through there, and I'd seen this, and I'd helped at Gem and Mineral shows here a little bit. But walking into the British Museum was like walking into a new world. And what I really appreciated about that museum is it was there. You could get up close. You could see the label. It wasn't completely plain when we were at the Sorbonne, because they had specimens up here that I could see the bottom of them. But I learned a lot about mineralogy at the British Museum. Peter was very generous because we plagued him a lot, and he would give us the keys, and we could go underneath and look at things. And it was just a fascinating world. So I decided I wanted one each of everything that had ever been described from every important locality that it came from.
That sounds like the British Museum, actually. so yeah. Okay.
Well, I caught the bug. And when we finally decided that species collecting might not be a really good idea, we came to Tucson, and we could have added 100 species to the collection. It was going to cost us about $8,000. And we thought, so I wasn't teaching quite as much. We weren't using as for identification purposes for the students at school. And so I had somewhere between 25 and 2,600 species in the collection. And that's when there were only about, I think it was 37 or 38,000, 38 specimens, species that had been identified. That's grown, and there's a lot. The real problem is a lot of those have little yellow and green arrows pointing to them, and you can't see them with a hand. Anyway, so we decided to sell the collection, but I said we have to keep some bits and pieces of it. I kept the Smithsonites, I kept the apatites, and we kept the quartz. And
was there any rationale why you kept those? The particular species that you liked?
I just liked them.
Okay, cool.
They were colorful. I liked the crystallography.
Good
they were interesting. And so then when we started writing the articles for the Lapidary Journal, so much lapidary material is SiO2, and there was the metaphysical thing had happened where quartz, you hung onto them, and when we had the shop, the shop was a center for this. When in the 70s, this was when the metaphysical thing really took off, and we also sold a lot of beads, and we had all the stuff that was going on in San Francisco. I became the bead queen of Berkeley. Actually, we sold thousands and thousands of beads. I mean, it was appalling, to be perfectly honest. But anyway, so with the articles we were doing for the Lapidary Journal, a lot of it had to do with quartz, and we were going to eat ore to buy gemstones for the business. It was a natural kind of thing. And Cy really enjoyed the crystallography of quartz, the habits, the forms. If you think about it, quartz does more as a mineral than I can think of any other. It's certainly the most interesting in terms of what it's associated with, what gets included in it, what it can be used for lapidary purposes, and just its overall aesthetics. You can't beat a quartz crystal.
And it's relatively common, so it does have a lot of associations with other minerals as well, so that you get some amazing specimens.
What's really interesting, because the way I collect quartz is if a specimen has any noticeable quartz with it, top or bottom, I can buy it because it's made with something. So I have probably 20 flats of quartz with, and when you put it together, it's really interesting. You get a whole different feeling for how it occurs, where it occurs, and what it occurs with, but most particularly what it does not occur with. And there actually are species that quartz doesn't seem to get along with. I'm going to throw this out. I also have another mineral that I'm very interested in: brookite, anatase, and rutile. These all occur with quartz. They don't all occur in the same color of quartz. Clear quartz, pretty much all of them occur. Amethyst, rutile, and I'm not totally convinced it's all real. I think the bulk of it's probably goethite or something of that. Smoky quartz, anatase, maybe brookite, and almost never see anatase, brookite, and rutile on the same specimen, whether it's in or out. So I want to know why. What's the chemical? What's the geology that causes those three minerals to adapt themselves to certain kinds of quartz? A problem for them.
And that is the beauty of having a comprehensive and systematic collection, of course,
right.
Because you can make those observations, because that's what our science is, an observational science.
Right.
And then you can notice something like that and then do the research
right.
that provides
right.
you with the answers. And I think in modern day environment, we tend to lose that about what collections are about. You know, we have our trophy minerals, we have our suites that we have, but systematic is really important for the research science that we have.
Absolutely. So now I've got all this stuff, and I love it. And I bought more here. And
So
I don't.
just go back. You were in EDAR,
Oh, yeah.
when we spoke briefly before,
Yeah.
that was for you, but also very comprehensive in understanding what EDAR is.
Well, we visited EDAR in '61, and we were very fortunate because we met Dr. Bank and this sort of thing. And both I and I really felt very comfortable there. And the lapidary, the work that they did there, at that point, theoretically, they'd been cutting the agate that occurred in the area for at least 500 years. Got documentation to a certain extent. So at the store, and there was who lived nearby who was a quote gem dealer, and he decided he was going to do cabochons, a lot of cabochons, and he went to Germany and went to EDAR, and he brought some materials, and this was in the late '60s, and this was very interesting. And we bought stones from him for the business, and George said, it's expensive for me to go over there, et cetera, et cetera. So we worked with a gentleman by the name of Prosper Williams, and Prosper was going to go to do a mineral show in Switzerland, and he said, I would like you to come over and help with this. And went to Altdorf in 1970, I guess it was, with Prop, and did the show in Altdorf. And then we went on to EDAR to see what it was like, and we met some people there, and I was really enthralled with the cabochons, because we were doing a lot with the street jewelers there in the Bay Area. And I said, Si, why don't we come back when we're better prepared time-wise and that sort of thing, and see if we can't do something. So we talked to George and said, we don't want to encroach with what you're planning your business. And he said, well, I'm doing some. He said, well, what we'll do is we'll buy the low end, because this is, and he said, that's fine. Well, he went out of business about a year later, so we figured that EDAR was fair game for us. And we started going, in '72, I guess, we started going to EDAR twice a year and spent 2 weeks there each time buying cut stones and mineral specimens and carvings, and it was, for us, it was a godsend, because there wasn't a lot, at that time, there wasn't a lot of, there was stuff being cut in India, which was pretty awful, and the stuff from China and Japan, this sort of thing, hadn't really started migrating into the United States. So the material that we were bringing in from EDAR was top grade, well cut, meticulously calibrated, and different than anything else that was available. So now I have a huge agate, because I had to keep one each of everything that came. Anyway, but that was the time we had in EDAR was really interesting, because the history of the valley is absolutely incredible. When you think about how long it's been there, how long they've been cutting, what they cut wasn't just cabochons. They cut African money. These were abstract pieces that they did in large quantities, which was then sent to Africa and used literally as money. If you had 6 of these, you could get a wife. You had 4 of these, you'd get a cow, and they did. And I have seen collection of these, and they were beautiful. Ended up doing an interesting sort of light on Murano, when we did the Venetian glass for a period of time. If you worked in the glass industry, you could not leave, and if you left, you might lose your life, because the techniques that they used for the glass blowing and this sort of thing were things that they wanted to keep on the island and protect. they did somewhat the same thing, not quite the same as they did when they were cutting glass and quartz for chandeliers. And this was done in France. And there were some cutters in France that were doing this sort of thing that went to Idar, and that's how some of their cutting techniques moved into the valley. The sandstone grinding wheels, those are one. I think the book is 17 something. Collini wrote, I think he was an army officer. Anyway, he went to Idar and he wrote on his travels, and this have the first illustrations of the sandstone grinding wheels and a description of how they worked, how they did this. It's working on a sandstone grinding wheel is hard work. I've played around with this because they had I think they still have a couple of places there where you can go in and actually see them cutting on these wheels.
This is where they lay down, isn't it?
They have what they call a clip stool,
back,
and they lay on it and cut this way.
Yeah.
And the sandstone grinding wheels are very in width, depending on what they're cutting. But stone they actually mine within 20, 30 kilometers of Idar.
Yeah. Fascinating. Let's talk briefly, delve into amber. That's right as well, yeah? The amber collections and things.
The amber is, of course, all Baltic and that sort of thing, and then was cut in that. There was Erbach.
But you began writing.
Well,
amber.
Johnson Kankis thought Cy should write a book, and so he decided that Cy should write a book on amber. Anything that was contemporary that was in English. So we started doing research on amber, and Cy took a trip to East Germany before the wall came down, and was unsuccessful in getting to see any of the areas, this sort of thing. And he came back, and we were working on this, and wrote a book. Crown published it, and Cy said, "Oh, good." We didn't have to do the book on amber. It was interesting, but his whole thing was crystallography and that sort of thing, and amber's amorphous. It just didn't click. And
but Cy did try to Russia, is that right?
He wanted to get in. He went in. He got into East Germany. That wasn't a problem, but they didn't want him to go anyplace else. That was it.
Right. Yeah.
So it wasn't too terribly long after that we got a telephone call from Van Nostrand Reinhold, and they said that they had published Jill Aram's Color Encyclopedia of Gems. And then they did Mineral Kingdom, Paul's book, and then they did, I don't remember. Anyway, if they were going to do a book on quartz, Bill Roberts back in South Dakota was going to be the major author, and Rip Rapp who also taught back there, was going to be a co-author. And they wanted a third author, and they asked if Cy would be a co-author with the book. So he said, "Yeah, that sounds like interesting." So we flew back to South Dakota and spent 3 or 4 days with Rip and Bill, and they divvied up the parts of the book. Bill was going to do the chemistry and the geology and the story, and Rip was going to do the archaeology and all that good stuff. And the leftovers we got, that was localities, nomenclature, that sort of thing, which was really what I wanted to do anyway. So, because we had written an article on called Name That Agate, which got published in 2 parts in the Buyer's Guide for the Lapidary Journal, and we were having lunch with Johnson Kankis while we were working on that, and John said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Nobody's interested in that," and we had. And this was early. This is early on. This was probably the very late 80s, early 90s. We had almost 900 agate terms. The word agate with an adjectival modifier. And that was then. where we are now. And John said, nobody's going to pay attention. We got letters. I now have Panama Canal agate. We got letters from people. You left my most favorite agate out of your list. But we got the leftovers of the Quartz book. Rip ended up leaving the school there in South Dakota, and unfortunately Bill passed away, and we ended up with the Encyclopedia of Quartz. And that, I can't remember quite, but it was in the 90s. And when 2000 came by, I said, Cy, it's 2000. This is a good time. This is a good cutoff for the book. We can, we can say, well, anything after 2000, we're not, it won't get included in the book. It was a nice. 2010 came by, and I said, Cy, this is a really good time to cut off the book. But that didn't happen. And then 2020 came, and he decided that he was through. And I have now, I think I've got 7 4-drawer file cabinets filled with notes on Quartz.
Wow.
All organized. It's arranged by locality, nomenclature, etc., broken down. So on the localities by state, by county, whatever. And these are all not just notes that he took, but magazine articles we tore out. You think about 50 years of Rocks and Minerals, Lapidary Journal, articles on Quartz torn out and put into file folders and arranged geographically. I've got all of this. If anybody wants to write a book on Quartz, feel free to contact me.
Absolutely. I'll put you on the spot here a little bit because I did a bit of research, and John White wrote a lovely thing where he said that Cy had an incredible knowledge of crystallography and varieties. He was an expert, must say that. And you were also, but you were like a tracker dog or a hound dog, hunting and finding the most incredibly interesting specimens. And I found that fascinating as a team, both of you together, built up the most comprehensive collection of quartz that probably exists.
Well, possibly. The problem with collecting the way we did, when you have specific interests, you can pass over some things that somebody else might really. So I was really interested in crystallography. If a quartz crystal exhibited something weird and it was affordable, we bought it. If it had quality that was interesting, then let's get. I think your comment, when you have something this extensive and then you start trying to sort of put it together, what I have done, because inadvertently we ended up with 3 separate collections. One in a set of wooden drawers, which was early, one that was in beer flats, and one that was in white cardboard boxes, paper bags, and that sort of thing. It was new stuff that we bought and never really saw the light of day. So after Cy died, I decided that it behooved me to try to coalesce and try to bring this chaos, some order into it. So what I've done is, when we started we broke quartz down into the following way: colors of quartz, amethyst, smoky, etc. So if a crystal is that, that's how it gets divided. Then associations, inclusions that are polished, inclusions that are not polished. Those are 2 separate categories. Pseudomorphs. Quartz is one of the most, it's probably the most ubiquitous mineral that acts as a pseudomorphing agent. What else? Haven't trucked. And then that's broken down to twins and whatever. And then there's what Cy called the end. And that was, and opal gets sorted out. And Cy and Dick Bedeau had a running discussion as to whether or not opal was, in fact, quartz. Their discussions were very, very interesting. And then the end is cristobalite and all that good stuff, and stuff that doesn't fit. So what I do now is because I'm redoing all of the labels in the collection, and when I do a bare flat of labels for the things, then I have 2-3 tables laid out, and I take the amethyst here and this what goes here. So I sort as I'm doing the labeling, and this is this is really an interesting task. If you haven't organized your collection, figure out how you want it to be, and then do what I'm doing. And you can work an hour a day or 20 minutes. I'm very fortunate. I have 2 condominiums, one I live in and one I work in, and so this is just laid out all over, and I can work when I want to.
And of course, you last displayed, didn't you, in the 2022 Springfield
Yeah,
show.
I put in 52 cases of quartz.
Can you imagine this?
And they weren't little cases, they were the pony case,
52 cases of quartz, all with labels, taken, put out, and taken back.
I was very fortunate with that. Dave Bunk, I made, what I did was this quote quartz organization, I made a list of what I felt I had enough to fill a case, and I actually, with Japan Twins, I could do 3, got Gwendol's, case of amethyst, a case of some lapidary material, et cetera, et cetera. Then Dave came out and helped me pack it and that sort of thing, and he drove it back to Denver, and he drove it from there back to Springfield. But I had, besides Dave's help, I had Frank and Wendy Melanson and Neil Prin and Paul Poet. They helped me put the cases in there at Springfield. Took us about a half a day to put in the 52 cases. Believe it or not, the show on Sunday closed at 5 o'clock. We had the cases, the minerals packed and in Dave's truck at 7:30.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it all came back, not one specimen was damaged.
Wow. Any questions? I think should we stop there and take some questions from the audience? If anyone has any questions, please.
You and Cy wrote about me in 1990 in Lapidary Journal,
Right.
Wow.
Jersey, with Glenn Lair,
Yep.
and 2 other people in the article as well, and Wade Miley, who saved my life. But Wade went on to do great things. Glenn went on to do incredible things,
Yeah.
of course. And I actually landed on the cover 14 times myself since then. And I love Lapidary Journal until the day when I came to the party that they had.
Yeah.
The new owners of the magazine had. They're no longer going to do the paper edition. And I walked right up to him when he said that, and I said, "You're dead to me." I want that, to hold that in my hand. And it's so sad that they went strictly digital.
We wrote for the magazine for so many years, and we went through some interesting ups and downs. But with Merle, as the fellow that bought the Lapidary Journal in the late 80s, he had owned the J.C. Jewish Circular in Keystone. And when I talked to him on the phone, that's the only time I ever talked to this man. He went in for surgery that weekend and did not come out of the hospital. And Merle was at that time, his secretary, and because she knew everything that was going on with the magazine, she kind of fell into eventually the editorship, and she did all of our articles. She calls herself the Empress of Events, and her nickname is Brutus.
That's it.
And she's absolutely wonderful to work with. I mean, we just clicked. We couldn't have had a better editor to work with for that many years.
She's the very, very, very best.
Yeah.
She had the original picture of her from the day one,
Yeah.
all the way up until the last day,
Right.
in every magazine.
Yeah.
Sugar is 14.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, the Laboratory Journal went through strange iterations, in part because of changes in the business. When beads became important, they perceived, unfortunately, that this would be what the driving force in the magazine from then on would be. So they wanted bead stuff, and so I said that we didn't do beads, really. But so I said, I'll write quartz. And one of the things what he tried to do with the articles that we did was to make them as interesting as we could with new information. So I spoke German, read German, and would translate things, and the things we did, and we could bring in information into those articles that would not appear anywhere else, which we felt would be good for the hobby, because it added depth to people's understanding about what we're doing. And it's unfortunate that the magazine died, and we don't really have quite the. But you have to also think that when the Lapidary Journal and Rocks and Minerals first started, they were really rockhound magazines, and the bulk of the articles in there was, Ma and I went out to, the Agate Hill, and we collected this and that, and we had this for dinner, a nice sunset and this sort of thing, and a little bit about what they collected, but it was a log kind of thing. And as it evolved and became a more sophisticated magazine, then we started having the problems of, what's going to lead, and what trends are they going to follow, and this sort of thing. The one thing I can say is that, and bless John Sankankas for this, John was a mentor to both Cy and myself. For Cy, and that sort of thing. For me, bookbinding. John taught me how to do bookbinding and this sort of thing. And John gave us a copy of one of his contracts with VNR with his annotations. And he gave the book companies First North American serial rights, everything else. So if the book was going to be published in French, they had to go to John to get permission to reprint. And John then got royalties, or could do whatever the contract was. So when the Lapidary Journal wanted to publish, we gave them First North American serial rights. So I have the rights to everything that Cy's written.
I hope that you use those.
So I've got all this online in hard copy. Anybody want to publish a book?
When you guys were in Edelstein, did you know or do business with the Dreyer family?
We were very fortunate. We were going to try and write an article about the elder Dreyer. This was before Patrick was cutting, but this long before then. Sure. And we spent a day with them, and it never really quite clicked. We spent a lot more time with Baird Munsteiner. We did several on things that Baird did. Don Pedro Metamorphosa, and then when Glenn and Lauren Stoller did Bahia. This is an interesting story, and I think it's important to comments about Cy's interest. It took John about 3 years to actually accept the fact that quartz had cleavage.
Wow. Big cleavage.
It's got about 6 or 7 directions of cleavage, depending on who you look at. Early literature says that quartz does not have cleavage, that it has preferential breaking, this sort of thing. We were in an office in Kirchweiler during a fairly cold spell, and one of the fellows that was doing cut work in the lapidary area was working on, it was a bowl about, a quartz was this long, maybe about this wide. And he brought it from, he was cutting, into the office to show the chap where he was and what was the next step, et cetera, et cetera. And as he walked from the room where he was sitting and into the office, we heard a crack. And the bowl was in 2 pieces. Temperature. It's really, they're cutting, and you walk into somebody's office and it's 10 or 15 degrees cooler, it'll do it. And it was right on the rhombohedral cleavage. When they do the horse's head, the neck is almost all right where that rhombohedral cleavage is. So they have to be really, really, really careful when they're cutting, or they'll end up with a headless horse. But this, having the opportunity to see, there was a fellow named Conrad Wild, and Conrad studied law, and his older brother was going to take over the company. And the brother was killed, and Conrad was conscripted to EDAR in the company. And he was very, very interested in the history of the valley, as was I. We saw to see a lot of stuff that a lot of don't get to see, like where they're staining the agates and this sort of thing. And Conrad's main business was cutting cabochons. And I would go upstairs in the loft where they had all the stones in boxes. And I would just take a tray and I'd go through one. And I spent about a week doing that. And Conrad would take Si out to see them cutting the stones and doing the staining and this sort of thing. For those of you who are lapidaries, they stain and dye. In German, there are 2 words for this, Beizen and Farben. Farben is color. That is not permanent. Beizen is a chemical treatment, and it's permanent. Most of the agate that you see, the hot pinks, the lavenders, those are aniline dyes, and that will fade. The things like carnelian, the brown and white agates, and this sort of thing, those are all chemical, and they're forever.
Fascinating. And you still collect today, yeah? You're still adding to your collection?
Oh, yeah.
Today, of course, yeah.
I didn't think today, but I did yesterday.
Oh, but there you go. That's told me, hasn't it?
And I've got a couple I've got my eye on.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah.
I was wondering if you've ever done any lapidary. Is that crazy?
I'm sorry.
Some lapidary. Have you ever done any lapidary?
Yeah, I've cut half a faceted stone tab, but I didn't polish it. And I've cut stuff on a trim saw. I never have been able to understand for me, grinding a stone. It has got to be the most boring thing in the world. Can you imagine sitting there with a stone on a dop stick, twisting it around and getting it all lined up and this sort of thing? I let somebody else who really knows how to do it, and I'll buy it already done. Truly, I found it incredibly boring. Maybe it's better now because you have a television set.
Put your headphones on.
Yeah, right.
Music.
But no, I actually had a fastening machine. We had all that kind of equipment at the shop, and I did. I tried cutting a cab, and it was. I found it much more interesting to sit and pick them out after they were already done.
Okay. I think we're about over. I'd just like to say that this concept of this series, Heart to Heart, was really brought about discussions and about, you may read about people in Who's Who in minerals and things like that in various publications, but you never really know the person till you sit down with them and you find out what sort of enriched lives they have, what they bring to the subject, and their passion comes out when you talk to someone, which doesn't necessarily come through the printed page. So I'd just like to say, as my first recipient to Heart, I couldn't think of anyone better with such a great history, great passion, an enriching life, and you're just very engaging as
Thank
well.
you. Thank
so
you
I'd just
very
like to
much.
say thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, well, that was a lot of fun. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Sweet, sweet lady. Dear, dear friend of mine. If you ever want to speak to Ann directly, check out the post that Blue Cap Productions occasionally does. Seen them Aloha Fridays. Ann is a regular attendant for Aloha Friday. And so come online. We love to chat with new people, just hang out, and you can get to know Ann Frazier a little bit better. And wow, what a wealth of information she has. So that is going to do it for our programming today. We will be back tomorrow. We have two programs. We have a 11 o'clock program with Jesse Fisher coming in about the Boltzburn mine. Now this is sort of a repeat presentation that he did back in February, and had some audio challenges with that, so we asked him to come back and redo the presentation, which he very kindly agreed to. So this is a fascinating thing, and this is a fluorite mine in Weird, and it's coming back online. So pretty soon we're going to start seeing fluorites from the Boltzburn mine. So this is actually a way to kind of get a jump start. That's going to be hitting the market very soon. So that is at 11 o'clock. And we have a presentation at and this will be Andrew Ford from Ford Minerals talking, and he's going to be giving us a presentation on overall excellence in finals. You know, a little bit earlier, I did a post with it was a What's Hot in Tucson live episode that we filmed with, and I've got to read you perhaps my favorite comment that I've ever received on any video I have ever done. And this comes from Muonium1, and this person posted, "Beautiful pieces, but gorgeous boy." That's Andrew Ford. He's got beautiful minerals, and he is a gorgeous boy. So come back tomorrow. That is sold out for in-person attendance, but as you know, if you tune in right here live, it is available, and we're going to have a great program there. So again, that is our program for today. Thank you for tuning in, and tomorrow, have a fantastic day. Coming to you live from the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery here at the Start Fine Mineral District in Tucson. See you later. Bye.
I'm taking over. Ain't nothing gonna stop me. I'm taking over. seem to bring it down.